Hello, legends. So, the country's in turmoil. What are our veterans going to do about it? Or are they even aware? Let's get into it. Neil, how are you, sir?
I'm great, mate. Good to see you again.
Do you see what I did there? I got the military respect thing in at the same time as welcoming you onto my fantastic show.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. No, good to see you again. Anyway, hope you had a good trip. Yeah,
Yes, thank you. Yes. Yeah, I don't know if good is the right the right choice of words. It was wet.
yeah, yeah. Right.
Yes. So, Neil, welcome back on the show. You've certainly got your feet under the table on the Bought the T-shirt podcast by now. We worked together, didn't we, with the Global Veterans Alliance during the
Yeah,
let's call it the medical nonsense. Everyone knows what we're talking about. I think
yeah,
we were certainly in a tiny minority of veterans that took a stance when really all veterans should have stood up to the plate, Neil. Would you agree?
yeah. I think but as you said as well, it's a lot of it's mind control stuff, and people just not familiar with the realities of life. I'm afraid. Yeah,
And just a quick, can you just give us a quick overview of your background, Neil? I know you were an officer in the Int Corps, weren't you?
yeah. No, I was a door-to-door salesman. That's how I started life for about a few years. But I went to Sandhurst in '81, and when I remember when I went through my first interview. When I told him what I had done before I went in the army, he said, "Well, you might make it." And I thought, "Well, you too, you know." But that was the start of my military career, and I just went into the Inc Corps because it was a very interesting line of work, and I'd never heard about them before I got to Sandhurst. So I ended up, volunteering for some units over the water back in the '80s, '90s. So I'd gone in there for it wasn't just to sit in the office all day, and it's the same today, really. I retired in '97 and I went into the security industry and I ran a lot of companies for Group 4, as they were then. And then I worked for some other big groups, major corporations on the, what would you call it, the corporate director side, before realizing what a mess everything is ever since really. I'm quite political, really. That's why I've set up what I've set up. Um, well, I saw what Tony Blair was doing to the UK, quite frankly, and all of his crew because he's not alone. And ever since, we've seen this continual deterioration, which had begun long before, but was accelerated by those people then anyway. So I ended up about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, realizing it's time to get out of the game and to start looking at these freedom issues. So that's what I've done really since then. A lot of stuff with helping ex-Muslims, uh, working with people like you, good guys trying to do something on the veterans side, but not only on the veterans side, but for the nation. Trying to help kids not get jabbed. I mean, that's a pretty good thing to do, Chris. I thought you did a wonderful job there. So that's what I do, and I look on the direct democracy side now to help people understand really that if you look at Switzerland, they have regular referendums all the time. 4 times a year they can vote on stuff that they can put forward. So I'm work with a group called the Direct Democracy Movement, and I set up very recently, the Veterans for Freedom .uk group, which is basically at the moment it's just me. But anyway, I've set it up. The website's there, but it's quite a political group looking after the big five freedoms. And the big five are, obviously freedom of belief. You can choose what you want to believe. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, so we can march, and freedom to petition, and that is the First Amendment as well, funny enough, to the United States Constitution, the first of their Bill of Rights. But the petitioning one is also about the right to call for referendums. Because unless you, me, and others, The people, if we can't call for referendums, we can never hold these clowns to account. So I'm not saying there shouldn't be political parties, but they should be under our control, right now, most of the time if we want to do something. So that's me. That's what I do.
Roger, got you, got you. So just, I want to peel back because people are increasingly becoming aware of something. I don't think the majority are aware to the level that you are at, Neil. And I definitely know they're not aware to the level that I'm at, because we're talking a sort of even a different dimension there, perhaps.
Yeah.
But before and yes, it would be great if the people that took an oath to protect this country realize what they're up against. Um, Plethora of challenges, but not least of which the rampant illegal immigration, which we have been subjected to, and I use the word subjected purposefully. But before we go there, having a fellow veteran, an intelligence officer on the show, can I just ask you, what are your thoughts on 7-7 Brigade?
So right, 7-7 was set up obviously after I'd left the military because I left in 1997. And yeah, there was no talk of things like that in those days. I don't remember, but obviously times changed. But my thoughts are, what are we doing if we're in the intelligence corps, and what are we doing if we're looking into all of these issues that government are, requiring these soldiers to look into that are to do with, they all call it national security, but really a lot of them are party political interests and also external, national interests on the part of these huge corporations, stroke, agencies and supranational
Globalists.
organizations. Huh?
Globalists is a
Globalists, absolutely. They're the ones who are pushing it. And so the whole agenda, as we know, let's be frank, you've got to remember, Starmer sat on camera, I think he was talking to Emily Matlis, and she asked him, so, Keir, what is your number one, Davos or Westminster? And he answered, Davos. So, in other words, here we've got an MP at the time that he was, party leader for Labour, now running the country, but his real source of interests are Davos, the WEF. That's where, or that type, that's just shorthand for globalists. So, our national leaders have all been corrupted, you know, they are all a problem now for the people of their own countries, or not all, but the vast majority, because they are answering to these supranational interests that, to an extent, have always had a heavy influence on us, but it's got worse in recent years, undoubtedly. And you just need to look at our business interests, for instance, Chris. The UK economy, when I was young in the 80s, only 3% was owned by American interests. Okay. And now the stock exchange is now 30% owned by American interests. So all that profit that used to be poured back into British industries or into British, jobs and work is now funneled abroad. So yeah, you'll get a job, but there's no profit for the nation that used to be retained and used it. So these are just signs of the supranational banking interests, the financial interests, because most of the world's economy is now owned by about 30 financial groups. And that was in 2015, these figures came out when a Swiss group looked into it. So, yeah, no, I agree with you as well in terms of, I know you're a very spiritual guy. And I've looked at all of that side of life as well. And I don't disagree with what you're doing at all on that. I think, good for you. It's just I'm trying to look at how do we help change it on the ground with, political maneuvering. And that is about us taking control as a people. But we do need freedom of press. We do need freedom of speech. If you're going to talk about these things that you want to talk about, like the immigration issue is obviously the massive one at the moment, has been for a long time. And all Starmer's doing is delaying our concerns. And each day more people come in. He'll throw out some red meat occasionally to keep us at bay. But we can't control him whatsoever, can we? And he knows it. So if he can last for till 2029, we're in deep poo poo by then, aren't we? What we're going to be able to do to sort this out is going to get very difficult.
yes. So couple of things there, and I just want to get back to the 7-7 Brigade as well. But the whole spiritual thing, you know, we live in a material dimension, don't we? That's undeniable.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
reason I'm having you on the show, Neil, is I want to expose this dark network. And when you say that, 30% is owned by America, it's not really America, is it? It's not the wonderful
No, it's not.
American taxpayer, our brothers and
Yeah,
sisters who we love dearly
yeah,
and who we've got a special bond with. It's the merchant class. And they
correct.
network exceptionally. They've got their own rules. They control so many narratives, whether it's the black narrative, the Second World War narrative, the medical narrative, which is a huge one. Once you
Yeah,
really realize the source of ill health, you won't believe you want to go and smack your mother for teaching all that bloody superstitious nonsense, right? So so yeah, with the spiritual thing, it's that yes, we have to fight it in the material realm because that's what we live in and ultimately create the future for our children. But also, we need to acknowledge it's an energy battle. They are controlling people through fear, fear
correct.
and trauma based mind control. That could
Yeah,
be that could be something as simple as the beauty magazine culture that we subject our
yeah,
young females to, and the utter psychological damage it does to them throughout the rest of their life. That's now men as well with the muscle magazine, men's health kind of culture. So that's I just wanted to clarify that, Neil, because the word spiritual is so misunderstood. I go with scripture. I go with the esoteric code that was laid down through, for centuries and centuries of understanding what is sort of going on. Getting back to the 7-7, how is it that our so-called loyal military who should be supporting the people, and I get it, I've been, on active service, you know how it is. You follow orders, you want to do your best, you want to shine. You you're not the most worldly wise person while you serve because you join as a kid, you join as a bloody teenager. How is it we've got a situation where there's a warehouse somewhere and it's full of computer gadgetry and soldiers, and their sole job is to sit there all day long sewing or attacking the narrative on behalf of not the country's interests, but in the case, I'm just going to use the word medical narrative. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, that medical thing that we all experienced, that they actually sat there making out that they was like, you know, great aunt Matilda sat in Australia and attacking anyone that dared question whether these things were dangerous, whether it's right to lock the whole planet in their homes for, in some cases, for 2 years. Just a little aside there. Another person I know died the other day. This was, you know, let's just say it was related to being locked in the home. It triggered a mental health episode for them, and their subsequent lifestyle choices. You know, that they died at 45. So this is a thing, right? So sorry, Neil. I will get to the point, but how have we got to the situation where there was one time in British military history where the young men actually went to fight, and you can have, whatever view you want on who they were fighting for, the Rothschilds or whatever, and I know what I believe, but at least they thought that they was doing a good thing.
yeah.
How have we ended up in this situation where they're against their own people?
I find it strange as well. And I noticed it. I'd left the military, and the island was over and all the Cold War stuff was behind us. That's when I left it in '97. But it was during the Gulf War. You remember, Scala was head of MI6, okay, and he was persuaded by the cabinet guys, Campbell and Blair, to hand over these reports that said, oh, it's 45-minute threat. If you remember, this was the famous thing at the time. Well, that's where you start to see the intelligence game being pulled in and utilized openly by the political class. So they became, yeah, and I know he regrets that. I know people from five and six, in particular five, have said that he now regrets that decision, but he did it, didn't he? So Scarlett started allowing the intelligence people to be utilized more openly, etc. And I think after that, you had 77 Brigade was set up a few years later, and you'd seen this subordination and lack of integrity, really, quite frankly, in my opinion. Because I looked at Scarlett, I hated the guy. When I heard what he was doing, I thought, you're destroying what's supposed to be this separate outfit that does report in the interest of the nation. Now, the political class are all compromised practically, but a lot of the people in the intelligence game will sidle off on retirement into well-paid, jobs in the city, etc. So you can get compromised in that fashion. You might not believe you will be compromised, but because you believe you're doing the best for not only yourself but for the nation, blah blah blah. So I think it's just all that kind of slip into the lack of integrity, and I think that has happened. I think I don't keep in touch with the army guys at all. I've only seen some friends in the last 30 years, or a couple of times really, a few times since I left. I mix with a lot of military people, but I don't know anyone who's ever been in 77, okay, and I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But anyone who's going to use the assets against us for a medical emergency, it shows how completely subordinated everything has become. And I think Scarlett didn't help with that. He started or made the slippery slide even steeper, and we went down it. So I think that those are the issues.
Yeah, when you look at all the intelligence apparatus around the globe, it's all been used for the Dark Order, isn't it? It's all been co-opted. Just got to
Yeah,
look at those events in New York and Washington 20 years ago, and there was a certain
yeah,
intelligence AG, their fingerprints were just all over it. Then when you look
yeah.
at, let's just say events in this country where things go bang, we all know the events I'm talking about. Again, there's so many glowing examples of the impossibility of the official narratives. But moving on, do you
Yeah.
think people are starting to become aware now? If you just look at our prime ministers, you had Tony Blair, or Anthony, was it Linton Blair? Uh, I'm going to say allegedly, but arrested twice for indecency in a gentleman's toilets, what we know as
Yeah,
cottaging, I believe it's called.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and now you've got Starmer, who's not a lot of people know this, but his adopted faith is Judaism. And the reason I say that is that has massive implications in itself. When you become under the tentacles of Israel, let's just say, there's a whole lot more stuff there again for someone who should be, what's that word when you stay on the fence, it,
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
non-committal. It's
yeah.
it's almost like him. Well, and then of course you've got all these rent boys coming out. The every time he gets a new car, it gets burnt to the ground apparently. And then of course the stuff's coming out about, let's just say, the children from the Operation U Tree and the 60s, and a lot of that points at our politicians. Do you think the public are going to start put two and two together and realize that to be a politician, you have to be blackmailable, and
Yeah.
you
I,
have to,
sorry.
sorry, just an
Yeah.
example, when the whole country, in fact, 1 million people march in London saying, no, we don't want a war with Iraq. They've done nothing to us. And a certain dweeby prime minister gets up and goes, "Oh, well, your weapons of mass 45 minutes," and
Yeah, yeah,
you can physically see the fear in his eyes that if I don't keep selling this narrative, they're going to show everyone the photos and video of me. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think, compromise is common. You look back, we used to look at the KGB and they used to compromise ambassadors in Moscow with some, tart with them or whatever. As all of those things are going on. But of course, were we not doing that? I'm sure somebody probably was, and it would have been exactly the same pattern, get them compromised in some form or other, because all's fair in love and war. But particularly when you're looking after, it's not just national interest, like you said, it's, let's say, greater interest beyond that, the City of London, the Fed in America, whatever it is. So I think people are more and more aware. And I think obviously the internet, podcasts like yours, just, all these different people who are talking about these things, it's becoming impossible to hide it. And, I heard again recently, was it yesterday, that they expect more to come out on JFK and all of this stuff. So Trump, he's got his issues, but by hell, I tell you what, he's a lot more open than these other clowns. I mean, when you look at what Biden was like, when you see what we've got with Starmer, then at least you're hopeful that more will come out that will, as you say, wake even more people up. But it's a long haul, mate, because the old media is still in place. The publishing industry is only owned by 5 publishers. You know, like I said, there's 30 companies around the world or groups around the world that own most of the planet. Half of the top 300 companies in the world were owned, or half of their shares, controlling interests, were owned by these 30 groups. So these massive conglomerations with thousands of names under them are controlled by very few people on these boards. And on the board are some of the most famous names, no doubt, or some of them at least known probably as well. So yeah, I think there is a growing awareness, and we just got to keep banging away. But as I said, I work with this group. We're looking at getting direct democracy, where we get the final say on all the laws coming out. If we want it, we can call a referendum, or we implement an idea for a referendum and get support for it. Now, this is similar to what the Swiss have been doing, okay, but we can even improve on that and take greater control in Britain. And we've got supporters. We've even got people standing as candidates, for this idea now. And we got the first councillor up in Wellingborough recently. So you've got to get active on the ground, work from the bottom up, come in from the top down. Believe it or not, Nigel Farage, I gave him my book, this one. I'm not trying to sell this here because you can get this for free on our website, DD right now, and you can get a free version on audio, so people can listen to it, and you don't need to buy it. But the bottom line is, like you, I'm trying to get the message out, and I cover some of these things, a lot of these things that we're talking about now. But yeah, I think people are wising up, maybe more so than we realise, and the young maybe even more so, because they're looking at a lot of this stuff, and they're looking at the independent guys on YouTube like you and others as well as us older folk. I'm near retirement. I retire next year. So it goes. I think it's going across the board now.
what's so Switzerland? Bloody lovely chocolate, by the way. Um, Sorry, we was a podcast, weren't we? What we were talking about? Oh yeah, Switzerland. Um, what's are they subjected to rampant illegal immigration?
Funnily enough, mate, no, they're not. No, the Swiss have very tight controls. 20% of them are people who work there who are not Swiss. Only 80% of the people residing in Switzerland have the vote. They're very tightly controlled. And if you want to get to into the elections in Switzerland, you have to go through the local people first, and they'll give a little meeting. They'll have a meeting, and they'll put that forward to the canton, and then the canton, like our county equivalent, will pass it up to the top. So if you haven't put yourself out to help the country in the 5 years, 8 years, whatever it takes to even apply, then you ain't getting residency in terms of with the vote. So the voting is very much controlled by the Swiss, which is why it's got the lowest murder rate alongside Japan at the bottom of the table. in terms of crime, hardly any. And then at the top end, it's got one of the top salaries on the planet. But that's because they've got great education. But who chooses the education, Chris, for the last 148 years, you see? It's the Swiss people. Yeah, they've got more Nobel Prizes per head of people than we have, than the Americans have, than Israel has. Doesn't matter what country. Then yeah, I think they're third on the list, and the other two are tiny little islands. So these guys have superb education. Einstein was educated there, and he kept his Swiss passport till he died. And he said they were the nicest people, kindest people he'd seen on the planet. But that'll be because, Chris, they control it. The people are equal. They have the same weight. They can carry forward referendums. You don't get told by some party person. I mean, we've got whips here, haven't we? Party whips. That is telling you everything you need to know about politics, doesn't it, really? The whip comes in and he tells the MP, do this, do that. If you don't, you'll never get that plum job, will you? And that's where the compromise stuff comes in, mate. If you want to get ahead, if you see a leader of a party, if you see senior ministers, somewhere along the line, they've had to bow their head and be told what to do. And unless they can prove they would do that, they ain't getting that job. So that all compromise at that level, I believe, and maybe some of the backbenchers are not, like Andrew Bridgen. Yeah, well, look at him. He stood up and fought against them, and he's out. His life is completely disrupted, and he's thrown to the wolves because he didn't take the whip. And what was it over? Trying to save children getting killed. I mean, there's integrity, and the rest of them show their lack of it.
Yeah, that's another thing about the old spiritual battle. Spiritual's a very misleading word. I think everyone thinks it's like about religion or something.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
let's call it the energy battle. Is during the
yeah,
medical nonsense, I worked for 2 years for free at that, Neil, putting the Global Veterans Alliance together.
yeah.
Um, I think I did the odd podcast during that period. It was phenomenally it was a phenomenal workload and a massive amount of stress. And
Yeah.
here's the thing, though, I'm not complaining because you know it was it easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. It just means to live in paradise. You go with your values. You go with what is right for the next generation. You don't bring children into this world if you're not going to protect those little, you know, those. Can I say little sods? Is that I must sound like my bloody parents' generation? The little ones, you know what I mean? But I can tell you now, I was chatting with special forces who were saying it's wrong, Chris, isn't it? It's wrong what they're, and I'm like, yeah, we'll be in London next Saturday. You're going to be there, aren't you? Ah, um, it kind of conflicts with me. I could be careful what I say here because I don't want to drop anyone in the shit. But you know, it conflicts with the group that I belong to on a bloody Monday evening or what. Do you know what I mean? I'll
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, I
know,
do. Yeah,
I might be ostracized or I'm selling this product at the moment, Chris, and I don't want it to, me standing up for the kids might have an effect on sale, and it was all of that, and I'm not having a go, Neil. I don't judge other people. I understand the energy battle. I know how it all works. You know, that's
yeah,
why
yeah,
the beautiful thing is you can work on yourself and all the answers are inside you. So that's kind of, you know, um, so sorry, went slightly on a tangent then. Bringing it back to the Swiss, do you think that they've got it good there because it's stability for the banks?
No, I don't. It's possible. Who knows? Because those links go back obviously some time, and there's all kinds of stories about the Templars and all of this putting their money in there. But it's following that trail in these ancient books and finding your way through it all that makes it difficult to assess it completely. Because as an intelligence guy, I'm looking for pretty solid evidence. So I think they went very early on, don't forget, and fought the Habsburgs back in the 14th century. They fought for their freedom long before banking. Okay, the Swiss, these little cantons, just three of them got together at the start, and they're hillmen. You talk about hillmen who are the best soldiers in Europe, famous as mercenaries. And Thomas More, when he wrote his book Utopia, he portrayed the Swiss as people who should be slaughtered because they were very effective mercenaries. Okay, because they'd rent themselves out all over Europe to fight for whoever. So the Swiss, the banking thing is secondary. The freedom thing came first. That's what happened. And then, they were fighting within the cantons, though, and within the cantons, you had lots of little wars in the 17th, 18th, and 16th century as well between the townspeople and the country people. The townspeople were the merchants again, see? So it's not just banking, it's about money, isn't it? It's control of that. And then eventually they had a civil war in 1847, and they went into this idea of having these referendums on all constitutional issues. 1848, same time as the communists started with the Communist Manifesto. So you've had this experiment. You've had the communists with 1848, and you've had the Swiss since 1848. So and in Switzerland, there's no famous politicians, are there? None. Nobody knows a Swiss politician that I've ever asked, and that's because the people are in control. It's not perfect, Chris. I'm not saying it's perfect, and we could do better. We could actually make our system better, but because they can call a referendum on every law, because they can also introduce referendums, the people have got much more power. And our greatest constitutional lawyer back in the Victorian era, he saw this in 1890s, and he said, "We want that." He said, a guy called A.V. Dicey. Anyone who knows anything about constitutional law will know him. And he said, we should have the referendum. We don't need a House of Lords, because he understood that the parties were completely corrupted back then. So, he was right at the center of things because he was advising these politicians and he saw them for what they were. So it's, I do get concerned that not enough people will wake up. But hopefully, with the internet and all the things that's going on now, Trump in power, but we need to get rid of these clowns who are in there now, as parties. All of them. The only person who backs rights to referendums is Nigel Farage, because I gave him my book, believe it or not, outside of the GB News late in 2023. And since then, a few months later, he started coming up on videos that I saw of him backing the right to referendums. So with him, Andrew Bridgen, he also got the book, and he's big on direct democracy. He believes it's the solution as well, which it is, because we take control as the majority. And what percentage don't want illegal immigration here? It's probably 70% at least, isn't it? People are very concerned about people coming in here. We don't know who they are. They're all throwing their passports overboard, etc. And we're stuck with this, and we can't control it.
Yeah, it's only 70% because the other 30% have been
Yeah,
brainwashed through the university system to think that it's
correct.
racist to turn people
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
my, I'd always say to people, the best way to support other nations uh, is not to let your country slide to become like theirs. And the notion that you can help everybody and when you're in the university system, that just seems how it is, you know.
Yeah,
But we've got the United Nations Charter and the reality is that when you can no longer get healthcare because the NHS has, been stomped into non-existence, when your daughter can't go out to a party at night because wearing a short skirt means she's a slut. And I'm not being your typical nationalist here, Neil, far right. I've
no,
been
I
in
know. Yeah,
I've been in tribal Pakistan. I know how it works.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
sexually assaulted there. Fortunately, I can stick up for myself. But you get a crowd of blokes and they're all trying to grab your nuts because that's the most titillating thing they're going to get in their life because not allowed, you know. Um, this is I'm trying to say this is what some would claim. I'll pick my words carefully here. Is
yeah,
happening to is being imported into this country.
yeah,
Completely different value systems.
correct. Yeah,
And when this all comes to a head like it did for me. I've lived in Scandinavia off and on over the years, and I once my girlfriend was working in a my girlfriend was we were both working in a supermarket, and she was on the till one night, and two Somalians came in with a machine gun. This is this is Sweden and Norway. They used to have
Oh,
zero crime rate. It just crime
yeah,
wasn't a
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
minuscule, below 1%.
yeah, yeah,
And my girlfriend, being Swedish, was so like naive. She looked at these two guys wielding a machine gun and said, "What?" And they were like, "Give us all the money." She was like, "Why?" She couldn't, she just couldn't get a
yeah. Too
grip on
confused.
like what this doesn't happen
Yeah,
where I live,
yeah, yeah,
and so just want to just track back a bit. The point I was making, Neil, is I think if everybody could see where this is going, and that there's gonna it many would argue it's got to the point now where there's probably no turning back. Um, oh, sorry, I've just realized I've had my microphone on mute. I just got to make a note of where we are. 36, 32. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think a lot more people would be paying attention, is what I'm trying to say. Um, you mentioned Trump there, and I've got to push your buttons a bit here, Neil, because there'll be a lot of people out there that will be cross with me if I don't. So you've got a chap that was bailed out by Wilbur Ross,
yeah,
who was the money man for the Rothschilds.
yeah,
Um, you've got someone who's committed to Israel, and I'm not talking like the country per se or the people. I mean the whole concept that Israel was set up by the Rothschilds as their front company, as it were,
yeah,
with
yeah,
with
yeah,
which to conduct their new world order,
yeah,
from behind, at the
yeah,
expense of the people that are already living there, who we know were
yeah,
Palestinians, who have now, let's not even talk about what's going on there now, but everybody knows the G word, I think is undeniable. And on top of that, he's just brokered a deal with Zelensky, who was brought to power by Kolomoisky. So just so we all know what club we're talking about here, folks.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
yeah,
And what did Trump do? He brokered a deal, and he proudly told the Americans that they're getting BlackRock in there. BlackRock, big club financial
yeah, yeah.
center. Um, so I'd say still part of the beast system. Still,
Yeah, the issue is how do you um, change? I'm not saying these people are all the best answer because they're not, but we've got to get out of the mess. So anyone we can edge closer to the edge, which is why I work with the direct democracy stuff, because that's how we take control politically. So unfortunately, in America, they can do a lot of state level, but they've never had a single referendum at national level. So that's an issue. But Elon Musk, believe it or not, talks a great deal about direct democracy. He thinks it's the answer as well. He's talking about it for Mars when he gets up there, but I want it down here on planet Earth. So that's what we're doing in the movement. So Trump, yeah, he's. I'm not saying he's perfect. Switzerland's not perfect. We're talking about a bunch of human beings who are not well informed. And on that front, by the way, just so you know, I also work with another group. Um, it's run by a guy called Norman Mackenzie Richmond, who is Ofcom Watch. And the plan is that in about 6 months' time or so, there'll be a big conference on free speech and censorship. It'll probably be in the Queen Elizabeth Centre. And Elon Musk hopefully will turn up. So, and others. A lot of these guys who are running Rumble and all these other ones, Gab, who are being shut down now. So the aim is to have this, because you've got to have free speech if you're going to live free. How can we argue about what the different laws should be or not? How can we get a referendum on controlling immigration, changing this or changing that, if we don't have the passage of information is free and equal? You know what I mean? That we can find out what is really going on. And even Switzerland doesn't have that under control yet. So we need much more openness in our laws. Otherwise, as you say, Europe will continue to be controlled. The whole of Europe, look at it, run by the EU. Britain is going back under that wing as well, under Starmer. So, yeah, Trump's not ideal, but he's better than what we've got here. You see? And all we can do at the moment is push until the people actually have control. But the people have got to have the information. You can't have direct democracy and you can't and not have free speech. You have to have free speech to have a proper democracy. I mean, how do you argue about what's going to be voted over? How do the ideas that you think about, that to a lot of people are odd, are going to be understood and heard, and people can think about it then? But if they can't even hear you, then they can't make any decision based around that. So, yeah, Trump's not ideal. But all I'll say is he did have a falling out, so it would appear, recently with Netanyahu. That maybe Netanyahu's going too fast. But remember, Trump had this fallout just last week or the week before. So he said he doesn't trust him. He thinks he's trying to influence him. I think Trump's a bit like Nigel Farage. They're quite individual. They are quite individual. And so, people like say they're all controlled. They may be to some extent, but they don't have access to all the information, mate. They haven't got your podcast all day, but they do. At least he goes on Joe Rogan, doesn't he, Trump? Now, would you see Starmer going on there, not getting slaughtered, or any of these our politicians in any of the parties? So we need to replace the parties with no whips, parties that are full of people who actually do believe in their communities, because they know they're not going to have a lot of power. Because in Switzerland, the power filters down. It's a lot more at the community level and the canton level. All the school systems are run at local level. But even the great educational institutes around the world will say that Swiss have probably the best balanced education and vocational training system on the planet, which is why they make good chocolate, mate. They make good chocolate. They make good watches. They've got very good high precision engineering. They're famous for a number of things, but the salaries are more than double ours, and their disposable income, even after their taxes and all the rest of it, is much, much higher than that.
Did they?
They probably got, yeah.
I think I probably asked you this before, Neil, but did they go along with all the medical stuff?
Yeah, I think they went along with some of it at the start. Then they were kicking back and they started putting manslaughter cases and all the rest of it together in Switzerland. So it's like any of these things. When you've got a government, they start using emergency powers against you, you see? And then that's when the people can start to kick in, but it's not immediate. But at least they can kick in. And like now, they have signed up to the ECHR as well, all right? And that means you have to accept their findings as the last one, and you can't object to it. Well, they did that recently, and they went through to the ECHR it was on energy, green energy. And they were told you've got to have more green energy by the ECHR. And the Swiss people said, no, we don't. They told their politicians, we're not agreeing with that. You see, so what it meant was they're showing the politicians, we're in control here. You may think you've got an international agreement. Well, we have to do what they say, but we're telling you we're not. So that's where it may have been not perfect, but it's a lot damn better than us. Can we say anything about this stuff? Have we got any chance to say as a people, that's enough? We don't care if you think it's good in government. We're telling you no. We'll pull out of that international agreement, or we'll just say we're not following it. Doesn't matter what we agreed to. It's just a bit of paper in the end, mate. Everything's a bit of paper. And if the people have decided we've moved on and we want to change things, we're not sticking with that bit of paper anymore. And you don't wait for interested politicians who are going to get a job in some boardroom or get £10,000 a day, consulting fee for putting these questions in Parliament or whatever else they're doing to favour them, or get on a committee and make sure that job goes through for this large corporation. Or, Bill Gates flies in and Larry Fink flies in and goes and walks in and sees Starmer. And, I mean, could you do that? When I was in Group 4, the guys used to go to Parliament, the senior people, dinner, drinks, blah, blah, blah. What was that for? Because I'm sure it was nothing to do with getting influence, Chris, or making sure they got those nice government contracts for the prisons. Sure, there was none of that involved whatsoever. You see, so this is how it all goes wrong. And this is why you need to have the people can say, as a group, we don't like what you're doing. Yeah? See, it's not happening. But we have got no say like that at all. And we can improve on that. And it's not for me to say. I'd say, everyone else will have that opportunity to put forward good ideas. But then you go out and with freedom of speech, which is why we've got that freedom of speech conference, because I'm working with these people as well, hopefully in October, November, and then drive back on Starmer and drive back on government. It's not just Starmer. He's the only the current one. He's the worst of the current ones. But they've all been at it. Cameron, you go back to Cameron's day, same stuff, all telling us they're conservative, but they're not conservative at all. You've got the Fabians. You've got the secret lefties, who are all the leadership, all the cabinet members on the left, on Labour, are always Fabians. They're just slow burn revolutionaries. They saw that the revolution wasn't going to work, too much violence with Russia. So they'd been set up in 1884, which is why Orwell wrote his book 1984, because it was the centenary of Fabianism. So he gave it that date. He understood what was going on. He had been a socialist, didn't he? He'd been an anarchist, fought in the Civil War in Spain, and he'd woken up. He'd seen what was going on with Stalin's secret police destroying, the group he was in. He was lucky to escape with his life. So he came back, and that's why you got Animal Farm. That's why you got 1984. We're very lucky to have had that, man. And that's why the freedom of speech is before voting. If you can't have freedom of speech, they can feed you any old line, which is what they've been doing, and that's why the media, the press houses, the publishing houses are all controlled by the usual crew.
Yes. As I say, Neil, I'm playing devil's advocate here, right?
Yeah.
Um, for example, I'm just chucking this stuff out there because we need to have conversations, don't we? We need
Oh,
to have
absolutely.
this freedom of speech. So
Correct.
in no particular order, and I do want to come on to the just going to show your website. I do want to come on to the Veterans for Freedom shortly because I know a lot of people are
Thank you.
probably hanging on for that. One thing
Right.
George Orwell neglected, one massive, massive element. He just told the 3D functional material aspect
Yeah.
of what is happening in
Yes.
society,
Yes.
that we're going into this, you know, Orwellian dystopian socially controlled nightmare. He didn't explain so well that the reason we're going into it is because it's an energy battle, and these, excuse my language, these fuckers well understand it, and most people in the street wouldn't even have a clue what we're talking about now, right? And that's, you
No.
know,
No. No.
if
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
you, friend, hang in there because we're doing our best. So I think that, I used to quote, I mean, I've got a copy right here. I used to wave this around so much in my earlier podcasts, and then it suddenly
Yeah.
occurred to me that no, George Orwell did them a favor, didn't he? Because he left out the crucial component, which is what they're wielding to manipulate society into this new world order. So that's that. I also want to say I applaud you, Neil. Of course I do. Anyone that's stepping up to the plate to get a grip on what is happening with this wonderful land. It's awful to see people who can't go out in public as free men and free women pushing their children in the pram or whatever because someone from let's just say another place will come up and shove a knife in your neck over mental illness or a dispute or loss of face and pride, which is something that we don't really get and we don't have here, or whatever it might be. and so like I get it is what I'm trying to say. My sort of concern is that you nailed it there. Most people would look at my ideas and think that they're strange. Yeah, well, of course they could, because most people don't understand scripture. They think the Bible is like something that you
Yeah,
have in church. They don't understand the incredible esoteric code in there, which is basically you know how to get your biochemistry in order so that you're not anxious, depressed, fearful, lusting after, you know, whatever it might be, material possessions, women, your next McDonald's, your next bucket of coffee to get you up in the morning, your bottle of wine in the evening to anesthetize yourself, your hypnotic experience every night with your television set. You know, I understand that for us people that we don't do that stuff. Well, you know, we've done it a lot over the years, you can say, but you know, I understand to stand out and be different, you're the subject for attack. And I'm fucking fine with that because, you know,
yeah, yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
free
yeah, yeah,
person and I live in paradise and I'm never going back to, you know, living in a matrix got me chronically addicted to drugs and mentally unwell with no
yeah,
friends. Now I think
yeah,
I've got five, probably 10 friends, and I'll tell you what, they're bloody nice ones. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'm just chucking this out there, Neil. So our friends out there can maybe pick a bit here, pick a bit there, and make sense of it. What is to say that um, if we don't address these fundamentals? So I'll give you an example. I'm climbing Everest next year.
yeah. I saw
Um,
you start.
yeah, I think I may have very well landed on my feet. I won't say anything at this stage, but with a wonderful gentleman, former Royal Marine, who looks like he's offering to cover all the funding. And I've asked myself the question yesterday, bloody hell, Chris, let's just say not Coca-Cola, that's too glowing an obvious example of corporate capitalist poison, but you know, and certainly not Astro bloody Zeneca. But what if a company on the cusp that I morally would consider wrong, but the masses out there wouldn't fucking think twice? I don't know, BBC or
Yeah,
um, uh, uh, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, right?
yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I'm not saying I'd never eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream. I'm greedy. You know, if I was stoned or something, I'd probably munch loads of it down. But what I am saying is, I understand the moral question of shoving 40 spoons of sugar into your face, you know, combined with dairy, etc., etc. And if they came out the woodwork and said, "Chris, we'll sponsor your Everest climb," you know, we just want you to have Ben and Jerry's logos. Well, here's the
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
Neil.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Like,
that's how they get you.
my dream has just suddenly come true. I'm doing something I've wanted to do since I was about 5 or 6 years old. I'm going up the
Wow.
biggest mountain on the planet, and Ben and Jerry's they're gonna cut. They're gonna pay every. Now I know so many people wouldn't even. Well, they wouldn't even be having this conversation. They just say, "Thanks, Ben
Yeah,
and Jerry's. Give me the,
yeah,
you know, whatever it is, £30,000. Cheers. Where do you want the logo?" I am that moral person, Neil, where spiritual battle, what do future do I want to create for my children? Do I want to be promoting, you know, junk food? Is that the sum total of who I am? And and I weaken because I'm human and I'm fallible. And yes, I haven't had a drink for months. Haven't eaten meat for ages. And my body's utterly firing on the electrolytes because you know that's from eating so many vegetables. And this is how I like to be. I like to be firing and on form. And and I do, even I will weaken. You might see me, you know, in a month with a pint in my hand or whatever. What I'm
Yeah,
saying is, how are you going to start a grassroots organization where human beings are fundamentally weak at the best of times? And this is not a criticism of people. I love all people. I'm just saying
yeah,
we're in
yeah,
the times of Sodom and Gomorrah, literally. Just look at the landscape. People can't even say hello anymore or introduce themselves. People walk into a room of strangers and just put their head down and get their phone out because they've lost, the self confidence, the art of communication, etiquette, politeness. Um, the big club are winning big time on that front. You've got then you've got people going into their ego self, the Instagram culture, the decorating the body, let's say, and all the kind of, hey, look at me, look at my big muscles today, and look at my silly skinny jeans, and aren't I've got a weird beard as well, aren't I? Don't you all just bloody love me? And yet we all know, because we're old and stupid, or old and wise, I meant, is that person's like the most insecure and the most unhappy. And those pictures on their Instagram is when they're not depressed and they're not self harming and they're not, self
yeah,
medicating. Da 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 da. So what I'm getting at is it cart before the horse? Have we got to sort out the fundamental issues in humanity? Because you get your body of people together, you're going to I'm playing devil's advocate here, Neil. Are you going to get upset that your right hand man, who you thought you could trust, and he was going to build the Veterans for Freedom, that suddenly he gets offered a 60 grand a year job working for whatever it is, NASA, ICI, AstraZeneca. He's like, Neil, sorry, fella, it's 60 grand, mate. I've got kids to feed. I've got a mortgage I need to pay. You, you know, just chucking this out there, Neil.
yeah. Well, you know, integrity and belief systems are important, and I've never been a believer, but I've always been interested. I've always, I've studied all the different religions very deeply. You know, I've read a great deal on Sharia, so I understand, the issues with Islam and the kind of genocidal nature of some of their laws. So these are all the types of things that I address and think about kind of fairly routinely. And I support ex-Muslims who are trying to live free in this country who have to live in hiding. And I started down this road a long time ago, mate. I was 18 and I realized, I wanted to serve on the front line in the military to show my commitment to our freedom, like my granddad had in World War II. He'd been called up and they'd all had to go out. And I thought, well, if I want to hold my head up, then that's what I'm going to do. So that's what I did. And I was in 16 years and I volunteered, jumping out of planes, all the usual stuff. And I ended up, coming out, going into the security industry, but I was still studying all of these things, and as soon as I came out of the military, I had more time for study of the esoteric stuff as well. I was looking at, all the, as I say, finishing off looking at the religions, looking, because I lived in Islamic countries for about 15 years. I was running companies in that part of the world and doing jobs. So I had a good understanding of that. But I was also looking at things like Gurdjieff and looking at the quite alternative ways of thinking. So my mind is not settled on any one or the other. But I understand, what you, like you say, spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it. I look at it very carefully. And you go into quantum physics, and looking at how particles, waves, whatever they are, how they work, and how when you observe them, they look differently to when you're not observing them. So you start to see all this interconnectedness. So I don't understand it, mate. And that's it. So I just think, well, there's something fantastic out there. But, and you can call it energy, you can call it God, you call it what you like, but there's something that I don't get and I probably never will. But it does mean, you want to do good, don't you? You think, well, we're all connected, we're all in this together. So direct democracy is a vehicle for bringing us together on this kind of more material plane. But obviously, that's why you need freedom of speech. So the good ideas, like you're talking about, spiritual side, all these things, and there is some optimism here because people are getting realigning. I think to some extent because you hear the church attendance, which is a sign of that kind of thinking, isn't it, is going up. The young men in particular are going back into religion that had fallen away or never been in it in the first place. But so I think there is this tendency to move and creep forward. But also remember, you don't need everyone to come on board. You need a small committed crew. You had a small committed crew, of which I was one of them. You had us turning up. So if someone wants to come and join Veterans for Freedom, then they've got to understand it's very political. It's based around the big five freedoms. And if you're committed to those, I'm not going to get too concerned about the rest of your life. Because if you're younger than I am and you've got kids to feed and you've got, all of those things, those responsibilities, I think you've got to have more slack. You know what I mean? In terms of, are they turning towards, just the energy, the God, whatever? Then no, maybe they don't. Maybe they do get tempted. But that's life, mate. You can't win them all. And that's why, I think when I look at the people who want to join our movement, I don't need many, I believe. Because remember, how many of us? Like, you got 20, 30 of us at the front of the marches and the hundreds of thousands behind us, weren't there? And you'd organise that, mate. So I don't believe we need huge numbers. But, people do want to see the berets at the front, don't they? They want to see them at the front because it carries weight.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's almost a bit hard to sort of explain, Neil, really, without the risk of, like, I don't want to come across as being negative. Like I say, I applaud you,
Yeah,
absolutely. But you know, I am a warrior, Neil. That's why I live my life in a I do the things that may appear to others not to be easy, but actually you do them. So ultimately your life becomes easy. So you can, row across the Atlantic Ocean, run across the
yeah,
Sahara Desert, climb Mount Everest. These are the things that I just wanted. These were my dreams as a kid. And so I found that having a little bit of strictness, in the way that you conduct yourself just pays back massive, massive dividends. Why do you throw yourself in cold water every morning? Sometimes it's like bloody, you have to break the bloody ice, in the winter. Well, you do it because the universe just gives back to you tenfold. And I I just worry that operating under the beast system, you know, can you change a corrupt system by utilizing that system? And I know you're suggesting a different way of doing things.
yeah.
Um, how how well, let's just move on. Let's just talk about your Veterans for Freedom. What's it going to be?
Well, it's literally just been set up, and it's just really to support people like these free speech groups, or if we had a COVID thing in the future, do what you were doing, that type of thing. But it's tied into the big five freedoms. We've got to have all that freedom of belief. What about people, ex-Muslims, who are under threat? What happens if they want to march through their old hometown to send the message that look, in Bradford, in wherever it is, whichever town, and they can no longer live there, work there, exist there, and have been driven out. Who's going to make the point? What about these freedoms? We're supposed to be Britain where you've got freedom of belief. What if these ex-Muslims wanted to march through somewhere? Would we? I would go and march with them, you see, and I'd ask the people, everyone else, to say, "Come on, Chris, get people out there, not just you and your team, but encourage everyone to go. Your family, your relatives, because we're making the point to these people and our government. We call it our government. We're the bloody government, aren't we? You're supposed to be the consent of the governed. What a cheeky thing. No, you'll do what we tell you. Our consent. No, we're telling you what to do. We govern, you administer as political parties. Okay, and we need this paradigm shift. But look, I'll tell you what's powerful about this message that we're doing with, the right to petition, the right to call for referendums. This is the most powerful idea that we've got in terms of changing things because it's really popular, Chris. People love it. You talk to anyone, you say, how about having this power like this? And they go, nah. You say, yeah, no, it's been going on in Switzerland, all right, since 1848. They say, you're joking. I said, well, why do you think they're so rich? Why do you think they're so happy? Why do people like the place so much? Because it's actually run by the people. It's not just the chocolate. It's not just the nice snow-capped mountains. That's nice. But I tell you what, I've lived in Kazakhstan and, out there, you had nice snow-capped mountains and you had shashlik and all this good stuff, very nice. But it's hardly Switzerland. Do you know what I mean? And it's because the people control it. And that the whole, as you say, probably all of these energy fields change, which is why Einstein loved it. He left the Prussian education system, German, 1800s, and he went to the Swiss system. And why are so many of the Swiss children's development processes popular around the world? It's because they came from these free thinking individuals who had the right to control their state. Okay. So, if we're going to get control of the material state and the political state through the vote, using this system, I don't see it as being the massive hurdle that people think it is, which is why Nigel Farage is of interest. He is an individual. People like say, oh, he's compromised this, that, and the other. And I say, well, hang on a minute. Did we win the referendum and get out? Did it work? No, but he got us to vote and we got out. That completely disrupted the machine, didn't it? The EU. That was that. We've been hated ever since. And then he got the banks. He had problems with the banks, and he saw that out. People might say, "Oh, he's vain. He's narcissistic," but he's getting things done. And we're ex-military. What's the job, Chris? To like your officer, or he's a bloody good commander and he gets the job done. You're corporal. If the corporal's going to make sure that you got a bloody good little group and you're going to survive, are you going to look up to him? You might not like him. But I think he's bloody good at what we're doing. And that's the point. I'm not into worrying about people's personalities too much to get this job done. I'm interested in getting the job done, which is to make us free and to make us in control as a group. So, the nation will reflect our thinking, but it will be an informed nation. I'm intelligence. I've studied these things. I've looked back, you go back through Sabotage Zevi, you can look at the Frankists, you can look right back to all these, real histories that are written about by Hebrew professors, Hebrew speaking out of Israel, talking about, the Frankists. Gershom Sholem, if you read him, if you read Israel Shahak, and you read these types of people telling you about the real history and the development of that community, you look at Islam. You study Islam. You go and you read books like The Reliance of the Traveller, which is the manual, the English version manual of the Shafi code, Sharia manual. You can learn this stuff. You don't need to read that many, but on the veterans website, I list the five, and I list 5 places you can start looking at to see where the type of thing that I believe we should be looking to support people is, which is the Legalize Apostasy campaign, which will free Muslims from the threat of being killed for leaving Islam. So that seems to me like a good thing. That's called freedom of belief. So that's what I support. Freedom of speech. You've got the Free Speech Union is battling on our behalf on that. That's a very important battle. And now you've also got Ofcom Watch for the freedom of the press, which is looking at having this free speech conference on censorship in October, November. So these are the types of things that we're supporting, along with the right to petition and the right to assemble to have your marches. So if people like that idea, then they can go to the contact address, write to me at info at, there is info at, veteransforfreedom.uk. I'll get them and then we can carry it forward. But, it's a team effort, mate. It's a team effort. We're all team guys from the military. The whole thing is, there's no issue on ranks or any of that old rubbish. That's gone. That was the military. We're all now just a bunch of civvies, aren't we? We're all free and equal. My YouTube channel is free and equal. If they want to go and look at that, they can go and see the videos that I've done as well. And I don't do many, but I'll take my hat off to you, mate, for what you've done. And thank you very much for giving me this chance to talk to people.
So, Neil, just the last thing to finish off with, and this is something we discuss a lot on this channel. It's certainly something you're never going to hear Nigel Farage mention. There was that ex-SAS politician, wasn't there, in Australia? What was his name? He cropped up during the medical
Yes, yeah, I remember him. Yeah,
nonsense.
that's right. The
Uh,
lieutenant colonel. Yeah,
yeah, someone will put his name. He's an Italian sort of
yeah,
background
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
gentleman, anyway. But he came out and he said words to the effect of, "We've all taken our eye off the ball if we're not calling out the Khazarian mafia." And all of these Khazarian Sabbateans, whatever sort of euphemism we're going to employ, it all points to a dark conspiracy, a dark network, people who have a group who have their people in every position of influence, be it in Parliament, not just this country, but globally, be it in Parliament, in education, in the unions, in the secret societies, etc., etc. They control finance. They own the banks. They own Hollywood. What? How are you going to get around that? Because obviously, in the mainstream, it's not even that it's not mentioned. Um, but I think they try to make your life a living, misery if you dare look behind the curtain.
yeah. Well, there are obviously issues around getting over that hurdle. Yeah, the hurdle's there, but you've got to look at how things are developing now. The internet has made this more difficult for all of these types of people. The fact that more countries have become more democratic, at least in name. So, they've had to keep conceding a bit more territory all the time. And this is why I think you've got the desperation now on their part, on these people who want to control us forever. It's like the Norman yoke. That was us in the old days. It was under the Normans. And then eventually, it's under another bunch of yokes of the globalists, and what they want to do and all these operations that were set up. The thing to remember is as well, you've got to think America was not run by these people in World War II, the Holocaust was, a lot of the American hierarchy didn't care about it. They were getting word of it in 1942, 43. And you had the old American Anglo Americans didn't like Jews. You weren't allowed in a club if you were a Jew. You weren't allowed in this. You weren't allowed in that. So those people did not have control at that point. Now, obviously, after the war and the financial aspects and the banking issues, that we've had and the growth of its control globally, which it had to a large extent before, it's just gone off the scale. As I said, that conglomeration of all of those assets from hundreds and hundreds of different groups owning, the majority of the planet to just a tiny number now. Maybe I'll be less than 30 now because that was 2015. So you've got this conglomerate, but they're finding it harder. And when you look what's happening in Israel and Gaza, you see the kind of genocide word being used routinely. You see, someone like Trump even saying to, what's his name, Netanyahu, don't try and influence me, don't try and control me. And around the world, they've got their issues now. Their support is diminishing in many ways because it's becoming more obvious. And when you see hundreds of thousands marching through London the other day back, Palestine, it's telling you something. Now, the fact of the matter is, of course, do we want those people who are backing Palestine also backing killing ex-Muslims in our country? No, we don't want that either, do we? So we have got a lot of hurdles. There are a lot. But, to my mind, I told you, when I was 18, I decided I'm going to go down this path and I'll study stuff and I'll stick up for it. And, whatever the price is, because when I was 10 years ago now, I gave everything away, mate. Everything I had. I handed over to my ex-wife and I said, the house, pension, the lot went. You understand? So I stand on my own 2 feet. I'm not worried about some corporate. I don't worry about being this, that, or the other. I know what I'm like. And I've got a lot of friends who know what I'm like, and those people understand what I'm doing. And and these are important things, I believe, politically, and as you would say, spiritually. Freedom of belief, mate. It's number one. If you can't believe this or that, but you need freedom of speech to let people know about all these different things that they should be aware of or could be made aware of, and make their decisions for themselves. And we're all individuals. We've got our own being, and that's why we're called human beings, I suppose. We've got our own being, and that is what is important. So to me, let's just move forward, keep going. The door is, I believe, opening. I believe that things are moving in our direction. I see it quite routinely now. I was at another meeting last night um, where these things were being discussed, and it was an interesting meeting. But you see, people want a way out. But I'm saying you've got to give a direction. You know what it's like, mate. In military, you need a clear aim, and the aim is stated quite clearly on the Veterans for Freedom site. The aim is to make sure that we protect those big five freedoms first, because that will give us, in the material world, a better way for you spiritually as well. Because where the first one is about freedom of belief, and you've got to be free from people trying to kill you just because you leave a religion or you leave some cult or whatever else it might be. So that's what I'd say. The big five are what are important. If we can't even get them right, Chris, we haven't got a hope, have we? So I think focus on them, and that's what will be okay.
Yes. Um, yeah, it's quite complicated now doing my job because, I was referring to the Satanists then. They're Satanists now. They own
Yeah,
everything. They
yeah,
they
yeah,
they might pretend to be this religion and
yeah,
they
yeah,
use religion, they twist the narrative.
yeah, yeah,
People go along with it because they watch the Hollywood movies. They don't
yeah,
have any real clue that they're all being gaslit. All of
yeah.
them are
Oh,
manipulated. But
correct.
moving on to more grassroots stuff. So freedom of belief, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly. Yes, your basic human rights, right? In Magna Carta, it's probably in the American Bill of Rights,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
etc. Um, what? How is this going to stop? Or moreover, I think your person in the street out there is going to be like, Neil, how are you going to stop the boats? It's
Yeah,
all this stuff's well and good. It's going to
yeah,
take possibly years to come to fruition to get a veterans party that's in a good position to be in parliament and not be corrupted, which I don't know if that's an oxymoron. But putting that to one side, people now want to know who is going to stop the boats.
right. Okay. Who's saying they'll stop it physically, politically right now? Okay. So you've got to get the people who are going to give us the right to tell them what to do, because the parties have lied forever. You cannot trust any of the parties unless they're going to give you the right to control them. Okay. And that is what the right to petition is about. The only one I've heard talking about it is Nigel, or someone who's now ex MP, Andrew Bridgen. Okay. And you've got to find these groups that will allow us to end up controlling the country as we wish it to be controlled on important issues at first. You can get deeper than that later. But let's get control of the important one. And the important one at the moment is you and I know you're going to win a vote to control immigration in this country today. Yeah, you're going to get the majority are going to back you. So you need to have someone who's going to give us the right to do that. Now, there is a plan 2026, the Senate election in Wales. In that country, you've already got reform people pushing for the right to direct democracy, the right to call referendums on important issues, because Nigel Farage has been talking about this. He's the party leader. And so within Wales, if you can take over Wales in 2026 and then the Senate elections, you can then start driving policy in reality. Okay. And then 2027, you've got big council elections across this country. So what I'm aiming for is to see Wales with a direct democracy ethos, the whole way of thinking of the party in control. Then at the council level across this country, okay, so that we see reform in charge with them pushing direct democracy. This is the fast route that I see. The slow route is from the bottom up through the councils, getting them in there, getting your people elected. And we've got our first guy in Wellington, Alan Shipham, who's a direct democracy supporter. He's been elected. So he's the first town councillor in this country, in our history, to be elected on direct democracy. So what we're looking at is to see this building and building. But the shortcut is using a reform to give us the right to vote on things that we think are important. Okay. And the Swiss do it simply. They have what they call a petition. And if you get 2% of the electorate in your area to sign up to your idea for the petition, like, stop immigration, illegal immigration, whatever, and that is then put into a referendum if you've got 2% of the people in your who are voters to sign up. You then get a first past the post election referendum. Very simple. So that's how you can control it. So you imagine in Wales in 2026 that starts. 2027, you've got the councils doing this because they're under reform. And at the bottom, you've still got other people pushing them from the bottom who are going for just direct democracy groups, parties, whatever you want to call them, independence. So we've got to keep the pressure on reform to bring this in. It's very popular. I speak to reform groups. I've got talks to give to reform shortly on direct democracy. So I go all around the country doing this right now. So the veterans group is it's like the executive arm, mate, for seeing that when it's not working in terms of people are not aware or people want support, and we can go along and march with them, put the beret on, go out there and march in support of people who are after freedom of speech, people after freedom of belief, etc., etc. So where they're saying, as a group, the veterans or we as veterans believe this is important, and so if we've got any weight at all, if people respect veterans, then maybe they'll respect the people who are pushing that message more, who they might think is a bit of an odd message, but if they see the veterans marching, they might think, we should look at this more seriously. Why would those people who've served the country, spent years of their lives at it, be backing these people? So hopefully that's what it's about. Can't make it happen. I'm going to try and make something happen.
Yeah, Neil, I'm not going to sort of labour any points. So, like I say, I'm just sort of trying to play devil's advocate a bit here because otherwise there'll be people out there that'll be pissed off with me going, Chris, why didn't you bloody ask
Yeah, no,
that?
thanks, mate. Ask away. Ask away.
But no, I won't labour these points. I mean, it is interesting. What we have to remember is every single person that joined Labour, every single person that joined Conservative, and every person that joined every other party, Lib Dem, Green Party, etc., etc., they all joined, Neil, with the best intentions for their country and their people. And every single one got corrupted to a
Yeah.
to a man, a
Yeah.
woman and woman, right?
Yeah.
So you're up against some powerful juju, brother. I'm just
Yeah. Yeah. You are.
I'm
You
just
are.
saying, I to just pick you up to pick up on that point you made again. Yeah, it's this is this is why I live a bizarre life, mate.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
because you know I got a dog in this fight, mate. These fuckers, they hurt someone that I fucking love, and I'm not on my own there in the world now, am I? There's
No,
there's
no,
a lot of people. So
there are.
yes, on that point, Neil, I wish you all the best. Obviously, it goes without saying, I'm always here if I can help in any way at all.
Thank you.
Um, I fully admire anyone that steps up to the plate and anyone that takes an interest in this land. And I'm not even a nationalist. It's nothing about that, Neil. I'm
No, no.
proud to be English. Of course I am. What a great heritage and great place to come from. Someone's going to pick me up now and say, "What great heritage? What the slavery and the
Yeah,
uh,
that's right. Oh, yeah, we'll stop it.
colonization?"
Yeah,
Right?
but you go on and on. I know.
But my point is, I'm not against anybody or anything. It's just the rate that it's happening is going to cause tears. It's happening too fast, you know? It's happening. When I saw that video the other day, it was of an immigrant father, and he got his, don't quote me here, I'm paraphrasing, but the video was put on Twitter. He got his 5 lads to batter this little white English lad over there'd obviously been some quarrel in the school. And to see this little boy get, he's a fucking child, for fuck's sake. To see the terror in his face as he's got 5 lads, 3 of them like twice the size of him, with a father going, go on, get in there, lads, get in there. Like, fucking makes me angry, mate. What's that? What? This is where we live. We live here. We have to live here. Our children have to grow up here. And that one event is going to scar that youngster for life now. That's his PTSD. Oh, yeah. That's him on the drugs and the booze, just like I was. That's him having to go to what might seem bizarre lengths just to kind of get a grip on this world. So like I'm fully up for it. I support everyone just to wake up to what's going on.
Yeah.
It's an orchestrated plan to destroy you. It's not Islam, it's not Keir Starmer, it's a dark network. They've been doing it since the days of Windrush, and they are very, very good at destroying communities. And that is their sole aim. And if we don't wake up to it, if we keep blaming politicians for what's happening, or thinking Elon's going to come and save us, then we're utterly, utterly deluded. It's all by design. It's all by a plan, and it's all by a group who network phenomenally, and they fucking hate you, Neil, and they fucking hate me. Along with everyone else. So sorry, just I'll get off my soapbox now. Neil, much love to you, brother. Thank you for coming on the show. Much love to everybody out there. I'm going to put all Neil's links below. If people want to get involved, Neil, what's the best way? Start with an email to you, or go on the website?
Just send an email to the info@veterans, for freedom.uk. Right there, I'll pick it up, and then we'll go from there.
Brilliant.
Much appreciated anyone who does come forward. As I made clear on there, it's not going to be an easy road.
Friends at home, if you could just check that you're liked and subscribed and you click the notification bell. As you probably can gather, you're not really going to hear this stuff, like a lot of this stuff, outside of the channel, although there are there are some great content creators out there. Thank you to everyone that supported our Patreon or just become a YouTube member. $1.99 a month. You get all the benefits of attending our monthly Zoom chat. Your name in the credits at the end of the podcast, etc., etc., etc. And Locals, I'm just shouting that out, folks. That's our freedom of speech platform. If you want to get over to Locals, it's free to join. Although I don't do some videos for the people that pay to support me, because I couldn't do it if it wasn't for you wonderful people. So thank you to all of you guys. See you soon.
'Cause I've been living life right like I could just die any